Jason Hale stared at the burn mark on the concrete wall like it was a secret only he could read. The shape of it was wrong, like a human silhouette stretched too far, melted into place by a heat no one could explain. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there with his badge clutched tight in one hand and a crumpled file in the other. The kind of file you don't get through clearance, the kind that shows up on your desk one morning with no sender, no trace. It wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, it did. He opened it, of course he did, because there was something in the way it was sealed. Old tape, yellowed edges, fingerprints smudged by time, that felt more like a dare than a warning. At the top of the first page, printed in blood-red font, were just 7 words. What happens when Earth says no? It was a question no one had asked. Not out loud. Not since the surrender. Not since Turth Command signed away the last thread of autonomy for survival, handing over the reins of human legacy to a species whose name no one dared try to pronounce. But Jason remembered. He remembered the girl, the cadet, the one they said gave up before the battle even started. Funny, that's not how the reports read anymore. Not the real ones, the ones buried so deep they don't even show up in black sight. Metadata. One of them had footage, a brief 3 seconds of flicker static video. Someone caught on an encrypted loop before it was pulled and redacted. A human figure, backlit by fire. Her lips moved. One word, whispered like a prayer. Or a, curse. Then came the silence, then came the crater. You're not supposed to know her name, but you do now. Reese Maddox. Just 19 when they sent her to negotiate a surrender. Just 19 when she vanished, presumed dead, body never recovered. And then, 3 days ago, her voice came through a secure channel on Mars Relay 7, unmistakable, fragile and furious, speaking in a frequency that didn't exist on any current registry. She said, "They lied. I didn't surrender. I watched them die." And then static. Nothing more. Her voice was dated, older, like it had aged 20 years in the span of seconds. That same night, something strange happened in the North Carolina town where she was born. A baby, 7 months old, hadn't yet spoken a single word, turned his head toward a blank television screen and said, clearly, slowly, "Reese is coming." His parents froze. The room fell silent, and the screen turned on by itself, displaying coordinates no one could trace. I know what this sounds like, but you didn't come here by accident. You found this for a reason. Something in you always knew the story they told us, the story about humanity folding, the cadet too scared to fight, the war that ended before it began, never quite added up. Maybe it was the way the stars looked colder after the treaty, or how the skies over Houston flickered blue every equinox like the atmosphere remembered something it wasn't supposed to. But now, it's unraveling. Jason Hale just disappeared from his apartment 2 hours ago. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just one thing left behind. A single strip of torn uniform fabric soaked in what's been confirmed as non-terrestrial blood, and a message scratched into the mirror in black ash. She remembers everything. And if that's true, nothing about Earth's surrender was what we were told. Nothing. The apartment was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get at 2 a.m. with traffic humming outside, and the occasional dog bark in the distance. This was wrong. Weighted. Like the walls were listening, like the air had been vacuumed out and replaced with something waiting. Jason Hale's disappearance should have triggered a full-scale protocol, alert systems, a red-level breach. But nothing, not even a memo. Reese's message was scrubbed from the Mars Relay archives less than 20 minutes after it was flagged. The timestamp is gone. So is the technician who logged it, and yet it's still playing in my ears, not over comms, not through any file or stream. I hear her whisper every time I try to sleep. They lied. I didn't surrender. Not as sound, but sensation. Like a half-memory you swear you never lived. Like a fever dream that leaves behind fingerprints. I can feel the vibration of her voice under my skin. It's real. It has to be real. But then, there's the recorder. I found it this morning, tucked in the back of my nightstand drawer, the one I never use. Analog, dusty, a little melted on one edge like it survived a house fire. I don't own it. I don't remember buying it. But when I pressed play, it clicked once, loud, jarring, and then played a conversation between me and Jason. One I know didn't happen. His voice was off, just slightly, too flat. My own sounded younger, more naive. In the recording, he was begging me not to open the file. You don't understand. It's a leak, a backdoor. She's not what you think. None of this is what we thought. Don't let her in. And then, my voice. I already did. I don't remember saying that. I don't remember any of it. At noon, I get a knock at the door, not loud, measured, like the person on the other side didn't want to be heard. I check the feed. Blank, not glitched, just gone. I open it anyway. He says his name is Thomas Reddick, former intelligence analyst for Orbital Defense. He looks like someone who used to be someone. Brittle smile, glassy eyes, coat 2 sizes too big like he's hiding inside it. Says he's been off-grid since 2186, since the surrender. But something in his voice stutters, like his thoughts are buffering in real time. I let him in because, frankly, I need to know I'm not unraveling alone. But within 10 minutes, I realize Thomas isn't here to help. He's here to watch. He keeps glancing toward my kitchen, not casually, like something's waiting there. When I ask what he knows about Reese, he winces and mutters something about temporal slippage and loop fractures. Then he says something that makes my skin crawl. Did you ever wake up with dirt under your fingernails but no memory of where you've been? I don't answer. I don't need to. He can see it in my eyes. That night I dream of a place I don't recognize, but it feels like home. Metal walls pulsing with a heartbeat I can't hear. A woman's silhouette in a hallway of light, walking away from me, but I know it's her. Reese. She's holding something in her hand. A mask. My mask. And when she turns to face me, her mouth is sewn shut. She doesn't scream. She glows. I wake to find my bedroom door open. I always lock it, and Thomas is gone. No sign he was ever here. But his coat's still on the chair. Stuffed in the pocket is a USB. When I plug it into a secure port, the screen glitches for 6 seconds, long enough for the lights to flicker, for the air to shift. And then a video plays. It's me, sitting at this desk. Same clothes, same room timestamp 3 days from now. I'm talking to someone off camera. My voice is hollow, distant. They think the war ended, but it didn't. We lost something else. And she's not coming back. She never left. The video ends with static. And for the first time since all this started, I don't know if I'm chasing the truth or if I've already been caught by it. But there's one thing I do know. That burn mark on Jason's wall. It's starting to look a lot like me. The answers came fast. Too fast. I traced the USB's source code back to a shadow relay off the Cassini net, a node that shouldn't exist anymore, buried beneath years of classified wipe protocols. I thought I was careful. Scrubbed everything, ran quantum chaff, rerouted through dead satellites. But when the terminal opened and a single folder appeared, redacted M02. I didn't hesitate. I opened it like a fool, starving for closure. Inside, 22 audio files, all in my voice, none of which I remember recording. Each one ended the same way, with the same 5 words whispered like an echo falling down a well. She's still. The room. At first it felt like victory. Finally, a breadcrumb trail. I listened to all of them over a sleepless night, piecing together fragments like a man trying to remember his own name after a coma. I talked about Reese, about Jason, about things I knew hadn't happened yet. Launch protocols, celestial coordinates, phrases in languages no one speaks anymore. It sounded like prophecy or madness or both. But the final file, file 22, stopped me cold. Because it wasn't my voice. It was my mother's. She died when I was 11. And there she was on tape calling me by a name she never used. Don't. Forget who you were before they rewrote you, Eli. That's not my name, or God help me, it wasn't. I don't remember much from before I turned 12. Just flashes. The red door, the humming noise in the basement. The birthday party where no one showed up but there were presents already unwrapped in the living room. My therapist used to say that childhood trauma creates memory distortion, that the mind buries things to protect itself. But this doesn't feel buried, it feels edited. Like someone took my life and cut out the parts that didn't fit their narrative. I was convinced I'd finally reached the center of it all. That the recordings, the dreams, the whispers were a long-dead system rebooting itself to confess. I started writing it down. Dates, names, correlations between solar flare spikes and missing person reports. Reese sightings logged in abandoned comm relays orbiting Earth Luna 3. It all lined up. Every piece fit, until I saw the photo. It was tucked behind Thomas Reddick's coat tag like a parting gift I hadn't noticed. A printout, real paper, faded with age. It showed a team of 6 cadets, young, bright, all grinning in front of a Turth banner. In the middle was Reese, and right behind her was me, or someone who looked exactly like me. But the uniform was dated 2164, 31 years ago. I haven't aged a day. And that was when it hit. The memory I wasn't supposed to have. I was 9, lying in a hospital bed after the incident. A nurse leaned in close, whispering as they adjusted the IV. "This isn't your first time through." I thought it was a dream, but now I remember her face, same eyes as Reese, same scar under her chin. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a loop. A repetition of something ancient, something recursive, rewriting lives across generations until we forget where the script even began. And something is running it, watching it. Not like an observer, but like an author who refuses to let the story end. There's more. I found a video hidden in the system logs of my smart mirror, time-stamped last night at 2:08 a.m. It shows me standing in the hallway, asleep or in some kind of trance, speaking to someone I can't see. In the reflection, there's a figure behind me, wrong, out of phase, flickering. Its face is a blur, but it's wearing my voice, repeating the words from the tape. She's still in the room. I haven't slept. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I ever did. But the worst part? I just got a message on my terminal. No sender, no metadata, just one line. "Watch the first recording again. You missed it." I did. And now I can't unsee it. In the background on the very first clip, the one where Jason begged me not to open the file, there's a mirror behind him. And in that mirror, just for a split second, I see myself. Not as I am now. Older. Wounded. Smiling. Watching me watch him. And suddenly everything I thought I knew snaps like a trap around my neck. This was never about Reese. It was about me all along. It started with the symbols. They weren't carved, not drawn, but impressed, as if memory itself had texture. I found the first one burned into the inside of my left wrist, faint as a sun-faded scar. I don't remember when it appeared, but I do remember recognizing it. That shape, like a fragmented spiral folding in on itself, it showed up once. Before, hidden in the background of a frame from the Mars relay footage. I paused the video there, enlarged it pixel by pixel, and realized it wasn't just part of the architecture. It was watching, like a lens built into the wall, not a camera. Something else. The next day, others began to surface. Anonymous messages, on dead channels, references to a signal no one could trace. People I'd never met calling me by names I'd never heard. They knew things, personal details, phrases I thought only lived in my mind. The loop holds if no one remembers. You were right all along. Keep your mirrors covered. Then came the dream, not mine and theirs. I started seeing fragments of strangers' memories every time I closed my eyes. Bits of consciousness like broken footage spliced together. A woman in Nebraska standing in her yard while the moon splits in half. A teenager in Detroit carving strange numbers into her school desk, repeating a song that hasn't been written yet. an old man in Alaska building radios from bone, and wire claiming he hears voices from before the war. Each of them looked into the camera. Each of them said the same thing before waking me up in a cold sweat. We remember you. This isn't just my story anymore. It never was. There are others, hidden, scattered, watching from the cracks, in the system, waiting for something to trigger the breach. I don't know how many of them there are. Maybe dozens, maybe thousands, but they're all connected by the same impossible thread. We've all seen Reese Maddox, even if we've never met her. We've all heard our own voices saying things we never said, and every single one of us has experienced the exact same glitch. 208. There is a sharp sound and then a feeling like the world tilted, only for a second, just long enough to shift everything. I've started writing down the messages I find, on receipts, napkins, the backs of street signs. They come in waves like someone testing my attention span. But the most disturbing ones are the ones I don't remember writing. Like the note I found in my freezer last night, wrapped in foil like leftover food. It said, in my own handwriting, "Don't trust the third perspective. They can lie too." Which would have meant nothing. Until this morning, when I received an encrypted file from an unknown address. No text, just a video. Grainy, shaky. Found footage from 20 years ago, according to the metadata. Shows a bunker. A child, maybe 10 years old, being spoken to through an intercom by a calm, clinical voice. The child is me, but younger. Different. Smiling like he understands something I no longer do. The voice says, Subject E11 has retained loop integrity for 42 cycles. Initiate amnesia protocol. Inject false history. The file ends. My computer crashes. I vomit. Because now it's not just about memory. It's not just about war or surrender or Reese Maddox. It's about identity. Who I was before this life. Who I was every time the loop reset. And if that's true, if this has happened before, then who's resetting it? Who's building the next version of us? A third perspective has emerged. I don't know their name, I've never seen their face, but I've felt them. Every time I look at the footage, every time I replay the voice logs, or catch a detail I swear wasn't there the last time, I feel them. Like someone standing just behind the screen, leaning in too close, breathing against the glass. They left me one message, not typed, not spoken. It appeared between two video frames. I had to slow the footage to 1/200th of a second just to catch it. You are not the viewer. You are the replay. And I haven't pressed play since, but I will, because I have to know if the next cycle is already starting, and if this time, you're the one inside it. I didn't want to remember. I told myself that 1,000 times like a mantra, like a prayer. Not because the truth was too dark or too painful, but because the truth was ordinary, human, messy. Because it meant everything I blamed on conspiracies and loops and fractured time was something worse. Grief I never faced. All those messages, the distorted footage, the strangers whispering things I was too afraid to say aloud. They weren't ghosts or glitches. They were echoes of every moment I looked away, every version of myself I buried to survive. I finally played the last file, the one hidden in my bloodstream, not metaphorically, literally, embedded in a sequence of proteins, encoded like a lock, triggered by stress maybe by loss, maybe just time. I had to scan my own DNA to see it. A string of audio, fragmented, older than any record I've ever accessed. It wasn't from this life, not from this version of me. It was from the first one. My voice, raw, terrified but defiant, crying out from a place beyond death. If you're hearing this, it means we failed again. You'll think it's a mystery. You'll chase shadows. You'll turn your back on people who love you. But it was always this, it was always you. We broke the world, Eli. Not them. Us. We ran from the pain and called it a loop. We coded amnesia and called it salvation. And every time we forget, World dies a little more. There is no base, no surrender. No war. There was once a world full of beauty, and I chose to trade it for a simulation of certainty. All the versions of me, the loop, the watchers, they weren't keeping me in. They were trying to wake me up. And now, I stand in front of the last door, not physical, personal. A final choice on one side, clarity. Knowing who I really was, what I did, the people I loved and lost, and why I erased them. On the other, the comfort of forgetting again, starting over, blaming Reese, blaming the cycle, remaining safe inside the illusion that someone else was. Control. For a moment I stood there, frozen, my finger on the command, my mind filled with every version of myself screaming at once. And then, silence. That's when I said it aloud. Finally. What I've never dared to say before. I remember her. Not as a weapon, not as a soldier, as a person. She was kind. She tried to stop me. And I destroyed her because I didn't want to feel. That's what this was about, not data, not secrets, not systems. Shame. The kind so deep it warps reality around it, and now I know why the loop always resets. Because I keep choosing to forget that I'm the one who pulled the trigger. I don't know what comes next, whether I'll live through this version, whether any of us will. Maybe you've felt it too, that dreamlike dread, that memory that doesn't quite fit, that face in the mirror that blinks before you do. Maybe you're part of this, and you just haven't remembered yet. But if you're still here, still watching, ask yourself this. What are you choosing to forget, just to feel okay? Because sometimes the truth doesn't save you, it burns you clean. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found. Daniel McCrae was halfway through his fourth glass of whiskey when the encrypted file pinged his terminal. No subject, no sender, just a blinking icon pulsing like a dying star on his dusty holoscreen. It wasn't the first classified anomaly to drift through the back channels of the Terran archive, but it was the first time his retinal scan alone unlocked something this wrong. The footage didn't buffer. It stabbed into existence, raw and grainy, like a fever dream broadcast from a place where truth had been buried alive. There was no timestamp, only the name of the ship. Mercy Dawn, a medical vessel operating under full non-combatant status, its hull painted in radiant white. A red cross seared into her plating like a plea for mercy no one would dare deny, until someone did. But that's not what hit first. What hit first was the scream. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even human. It sounded like a child drowning in static, saying something no language could hold. And yet Daniel understood it, felt it deep in that part of the brain that remembers dreams before they fade. The scream was cut off by a flash, and then silence so absolute it rang in his bones. That's when the gut punch landed. In the chaos, the image froze. And there, standing on the bridge of the enemy vessel, barely visible in the emergency light, was a woman Daniel had buried 9 years ago, his sister, Elise, and she was looking straight into the camera, straight at him. I know what you're thinking. It's just a glitch, a deep fake, a file corruption layered by some lunatic with access to war archives. That's what I told myself too, until 2 days later, when the Andersons' baby, 6 months old, barely babbling, looked directly at Daniel during a visit and said in perfect clarity, "Don't trust the silence. Please lied." The baby went limp after that, coma-like. No brain activity, no medical cause. The parents moved off-world without a word, leaving everything behind. I checked the footage. The audio doesn't exist. Only I heard it. Only I saw the message Elise left behind in the ship's last transmission, encoded in an obsolete Terran dialect no one's used in decades. They knew. They wanted it. This wasn't just an attack. This wasn't war. This was permission. The fleet we sent in response, God help us. It wasn't vengeance, it was prophecy. And if what I'm about to show you is real, Then we're not fighting a war anymore. We're fulfilling something. Something written in the dark long before we ever built ships to find the stars. And now, he's missing. Colonel Grant. The one man who survived the retaliation. Vanished last night. No distress beacon, no hull breach, nothing on the scans. Just one note carved into the inside of his sleep pod. She's not in the grave anymore. She's waiting in the light. And the worst part, we can't remember if he was ever on board. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Not because he didn't try, but because every time he closed his eyes, he woke up somewhere else. Once he was at the bridge, alone, alarms wailing in reverse. Once, in the corridor outside the cryo bay, the walls pulsing like lungs. And once, in the worst of them, he stood before a mirror in his own quarters, watching himself mouth a name that didn't belong to anyone alive or anyone dead. The name wasn't his, but it was carved into his chest in bruises, just under the collarbone. When he finally tore himself from the sheets, gasping for air that felt too cold to be real, there was blood under his fingernails and a message scrawled into the condensation on the viewport. You were on the ship, Daniel. You always were. He ran diagnostics, full neural scans, sanity protocols, AI integrity sweeps. All clear. Everything said he was fine. Everything said there was no anomaly. But when he pulled up the crew manifest again, just to be sure, he found something he couldn't explain. Grant's name was there, yes, but it was embedded in a different layer. Metadata tagged with a string that didn't belong to Earthfleet systems. In a dead dialect. The same one Elise used. That's when Sarah Lorne appeared. She used to be a field psych officer before she went off the grid. Before she was dishonorably discharged for emotional instability and falsifying memory records. She found Daniel in the mess hall, 3 a.m. ship time, seated alone at a table with 3 trays of untouched food. She didn't ask why he looked like he hadn't blinked in hours. She just sat down and said, You're hearing the echoes too, aren't you? Her eyes didn't match. One brown, one silver, a military-grade replacement that shimmered when the ship's lighting glitched. Daniel didn't answer right away, mostly because he didn't know which part of her to believe. Her reputation was a mess of whispers, forged audio logs, conversations she insisted were scrubbed by command, a journal filled with coordinates to places that didn't exist anymore. But what chilled him wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say. She didn't ask about Elise. She didn't ask about the baby. She didn't ask who he was eating with. Instead, she slid a recorder across the table. Play it, she said, voice low and fraying at the edges. Daniel hit play. Static. More static. Then a voice. His voice. Calm. Authoritative. Recorded. During a fleet debrief that never happened. Execute on signal. Target Mercy Dawn. Civilian presence confirmed. Orders from highest tier, no survivors. Daniel froze. He had no memory of this, no operational authority to give such a command. He tried to pause the playback, but it kept going. Then came Elise's voice, clear, terrified, whispering something just before the transmission cut. This isn't the first time. It's just the first time we remember. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sarah leaned in close, breath brushing the side of his face. I found 8 recordings like that. Different voices, different orders. Always the same ship, always Mercy Dawn. It's a loop, Daniel. Someone's rewriting what we know. We're not recovering memories. We're shedding them. He stared at her, at the tremble in her fingers, at the faint line of scar tissue, behind her ear like someone had once rewired her brain and tried to hide it. What are you saying? He finally asked, barely trusting his own voice. She smiled, tired, broken, too empty to be dangerous. I'm saying we're not victims of a cover-up. We're participants in something older than Earthfleet, older than memory. They're not erasing the truth, they're replacing it. And whatever's underneath, it doesn't want to stay buried anymore. A low chime rang through the ship. System error, a glitch in the core timer. Or so he thought. But when the lights flickered and came back on, Daniel noticed something else. The mess hall was empty again. The 3 trays? Gone. Sarah Lorne? Gone. No signs on the cams, no trace on the ship logs. The recording, missing from his data pad. Only the message on the viewport remained. But now it said something different. Check your birth record. The date doesn't exist. And Daniel realized he couldn't remember his mother's face. Or ever being a child. Daniel spent the next 19 hours clawing through the deepest layers of Earth Fleet archives, bypassing firewalls he hadn't known existed, hunting a thread he couldn't name. With every encrypted file unlocked, every corrupted data string patched, he built a picture, one that made sense for the first time since Mercy Dawn. There it was, black and white mission footage, security briefings, crew manifests unaltered by metadata manipulation. Grant had been real. Sarah had served 3 tours, 2 commendations, 1 court-martial. Even Elise. She had never died. Not officially. Her status had always read classified redeployment. She hadn't lied, Daniel told himself. She hadn't been allowed to tell the truth. It was all here, in these hidden layers, tucked beneath the fabricated surface of a war story that never matched the facts. He leaned back, jaw locked, adrenaline thrumming with purpose. It was real. The glitch, the vanishings, the voices, they were part of something engineered, an experiment, a cover-up, maybe even something off-world. He didn't care what it was anymore. He'd found it. He had proof, until the file changed. Not disappeared. Changed. Right before his eyes, Elise's photo, her intake image, tagged with her deployment number and clearance badge, shifted by less than a frame. Just enough to twist her smile upward, to tilt her head 2 degrees in the wrong direction. And her eyes. God, her eyes. They weren't looking into the camera anymore. They were looking at him. He froze, tried to scrub the file, refresh. The archive. Nothing responded. The image grew grainier, but the face grew sharper, pixelated and personal, like it knew him, like it had always known. The screen dimmed to black, and a line of text burned itself across the void. False. Resolution accepted. Resume cycle. That's when he remembered Ohio. Summer of '84. He was 6, maybe 7. Visiting his uncle's lake house, watching fireflies drift over the water. There'd been a storm that night, the power out for hours. But he remembered the static, the old Zenith TV turning on by itself. No cable, just a screen of swirling gray and a voice. Not words, a rhythm, like breathing that didn't belong in that room, like something waiting. The next morning, he woke up in the crawl space beneath the stairs, arms covered in mud and rust, with no memory of how he got there. His uncle never spoke about it, just said he'd been sleepwalking. But now that same pulse was humming through the ship's floor beneath his feet, deep in the hull. That same sound was crawling up his spine, whispering in the walls of his mind. He wasn't unlocking anything, he was reactivating it. The datapad chimed. 1 new file, no sender, audio only, shaky, old. Background distortion like it had been recorded through 3 feet of water. A child's voice, young, afraid, whispering. He's waking up again, but he doesn't know who he is yet. Daniel dropped the pad, backed away. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from a deep animal certainty. This wasn't about Mercy Dawn. It never was. That was just the trigger. The signal, like a key turning in a lock, buried inside their memory. Inside his memory. A test to see who would start to remember. He turned to leave. Lights flickered, and there, on the glass of the control room where his reflection should have been, stood a figure in his Earth Fleet uniform, older, hollow-eyed, watching him through the mirror. It looked just like him. But its mouth was moving, and Daniel wasn't speaking. Roll credits. Because now, none of what you've seen can be trusted. Not the war. Not the memories. Not even Daniel. Daniel wasn't alone anymore. But that didn't bring comfort. It brought something worse. Confirmation. The kind that sinks into your bones and makes you wish you'd never gone looking. It started with a message, not sent, but shown, etched in thermal distortion on the hallway glass outside the infirmary. A smear of letters that weren't visible under normal light, only under the flickering emergency backup systems, during scheduled power cycling. We remember too. Stop looking. At first, he thought it was another hallucination, part of the spiral, the slow unraveling of a mind being devoured by its own memories. But then he saw it again. In a dream that wasn't a dream, Sarah was there, except her name tag read something else. D. Miles, a woman he'd never met but recognized in that immediate, terrifying way you recognize a face from the edge of a nightmare you've carried since childhood. They stood on the bridge of a ship that looked like Mercy Dawn, but older, warped, impossible. And behind her, dozens of figures, blurry, wrong, stood silently, watching him. Every time he turned to look at them directly, they vanished. Every time he looked away, he felt them move closer. D. Miles leaned in, whispered into his ear, not words, but a vibration that ran under his skin, setting his teeth on edge. And when he woke up gasping, there was a mark on his arm, 3 concentric circles drawn in ash. He scrubbed it off. It came back, fainter, but deeper, like a scar he'd forgotten having. That same day, others started stepping forward, quietly, not with words, with gestures. The engineering lieutenant who tapped his boot 3 times while passing Daniel in the corridor. The comms officer who left an old Earth-era Polaroid in the cafeteria, blurred, yellowed, showing 6 officers standing in front of a ship no one recognized, with Daniel in the center, smiling. Date stamp, April 9th, 1986 SAG. A year before Daniel was born. They were all connected, not through roles or ranks or history, but through something else. A pattern, a frequency, hidden in shared dreams and mirror reflections that didn't line up and shadows that lingered longer than their sources. They knew. They had been watching him ever since the first breach. Ever since he started remembering. And then came the footage, unlabeled, undated. No source code. Grainy and distorted like a found VHS pulled from a flooded basement. Daniel stared at the feed, heart stuttering, mind trying to reject what he saw. A hospital room, white, sterile, and too still. A boy, no older than 7, strapped to a bed, whispering to the camera. "You were right all along. They kept us here so we couldn't remember where we came from. You're not crazy. They just want you to believe you are." The boy had his eyes. Exactly his eyes. He paused it, played it again, froze it on the timestamp hidden in the corner under an encoded layer. He decrypted it line by line, sweat on his palms, the world tilting sideways. The footage was from 20 years ago. The hospital wasn't on Earthfleet logs. It didn't appear on any star maps. But its file tag had one strange identifier. Alithiage Protocol 7B. External observation. Daniel McCrae, SAR subject Echo 1. He wasn't the subject of the investigation. He was the experiment. And now, the observers were breaking silence. That night someone, or something, bypassed ship-wide security to access the central broadcast array. For 43 seconds, every monitor lit up with the same image. A crude, hand-drawn sketch of a person, split down the middle. Half military uniform, half hospital gown. A message beneath it in simple block font. This isn't the first. Life you've lived. The crew didn't speak of it, but Daniel saw the changes. More and more of them avoiding mirrors, covering old tattoos like they suddenly meant something else. A technician in Maintenance B sealed off a room with no door and claimed there had always been one there. Someone removed all clocks from the lower decks. Nobody objected, and now a third voice, neither Daniel's nor Sarah's nor the boys', has entered the recordings, speaking in strange half-sentences during system startup, broadcast in frequencies just above hearing. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. It ends like this. Daniel turns to the camera in the observation bay, the one you've been watching through. His eyes are empty now, but he smiles, and in his voice, not quite his own, he says, "You've been with me this whole time, haven't you?" The screen flickers, static, then a frame freezes, one you weren't supposed to catch. Your room, your reflection, but someone else is standing behind you, watching. The silence inside Daniel wasn't quiet. It throbbed like a wound that had never healed, a cavity carved out by memory or the absence of it. The ship no longer felt like a place, but a thought he was trapped inside. Hallways looped, doors didn't lead where they should. Faces shifted slightly each time he blinked, like reality was being painted and repainted in real time. Yet it was not the distortions that undid him. It was the clarity. The sudden stillness, when everything made a kind of emotional sense that no data file ever could. Not when he discovered the old med bay below Deck 9. Not when he found the wall scratched with dozens of names, many of which matched his own handwriting. Daniel McCrae, DM, Echo 1, Echo 3, Echo 7. And not when he found the file left for him in a box no larger than a palm. An audio clip so simple, so human, it should have meant nothing. It was his mother's voice, not the abstract idea of her, the real her, humming an old earth lullaby. One he'd forgotten, but his body hadn't. The moment it played, he collapsed to his knees, choking on a grief he hadn't known he carried. The sound of her voice was like a key turning. And then, the memories rushed in. He remembered. Not everything. Just enough to hurt. The hospital wasn't a metaphor. It was where he was raised, grown. He hadn't been born in the way he thought. He had been designed. He had been part of something greater, something called Aletheia, a program to create. Minds capable of absorbing impossible trauma, of rewriting history internally to protect the collective narrative. But something failed, or something worked too well, because he began to dream of lives that weren't his, and found that they were. He was the echo of every Daniel before him, built to carry the burden of a truth no one else could survive, and now he stood before a choice. The observers had made contact fully, not as ghosts or phantoms, but as versions of himself, scattered across timelines, experiments, memories stitched from fear and pain. They begged him not to break the loop. They warned him, "If you remember everything, you cease to be human. You become the system itself. You become the one watching." But what is humanity, if not the ability to choose the unbearable over the convenient lie? Daniel walked into the control chamber, where the final sequence awaited, a neural merge that would allow him to see every version of himself, every failed cycle, every ghost that whispered to him in reflections. Sarah appeared again, flickering, broken, real. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, not digital, not programmed, just grief. "If you do this," she said, "you'll lose who you think you are. But maybe that's the only way to remember who we were supposed to be." He placed his hand on the console, and he hesitated, not out of fear, but love. A love for a woman he barely remembered, for a child who might never have existed, for the possibility that even engineered memories could hold truth. And in that moment he asked, not with words, but with soul, "What does it mean to be real, if our pain is artificial but our sorrow is true?" The console activated. Everything. Dissolved. No, not dissolved. Opened. And the voice returned, this time his own. But older, wiser, terrified. "You were never meant to survive this long." Then silence, the screen fades to black. A single breath lingers, and then, "Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found."